From the moment consciousness flickered into life, a veil was drawn across your vision, not by accident nor by nature's indifference, but by the very structure of the world itself. The will, in its ceaseless striving, ensures that clarity remains the rarest and most punishing of luxuries. As a child, your mind was not a tabula rasa, but a sensitive instrument tuned to echoes you did not understand. Every word spoken to you, every gesture you witnessed, every punishment and reward, all became the architecture of your blindness. They called it love. They called it education. They said it was protection. But what they were doing always was preparing you to serve the will. Not to understand it, never to transcend it, only to perpetuate its endless hunger. They gave you stories before they gave you thought. They handed you purpose before they handed you questions. You were told who you are, what matters, and why you are here, long before you knew how to doubt. In this way, the blindfold was stitched not onto your eyes, but your very being. And what a delicate blindfold it is. So subtle, so aesthetic. It is not the darkness of ignorance that masks the truth, but the light of distraction, the comfort of convention, the sweetness of collective delusion. You were not imprisoned in chains, you were wrapped in silk. Modernity, with all its apparent enlightenment, only refines the blindfold. The more you believe you see, the more you are ensnared by appearances. You are told you are free because you may choose between two falsehoods. You are told you are enlightened because you can recite slogans you do not understand. You are told you are rational because you mock the superstitions of the past while kneeling before new idols, technology, productivity, progress, that demand the same obedience but offer none of the sacred. You are taught to mistake motion for meaning. You are rewarded for action, not reflection, for expression, not comprehension, for agreement, not insight. You do not live, you react. Like a marionette whose strings are pulled by a hand it cannot see. You dance through life believing your gestures are your own. It is only through suffering that the blindfold slips. Not comfort, not pleasure, not success. These things only tighten it. But agony, despair, the breakdown of the carefully scripted performance, these tear at the veil. When what you have built crumbles, when what you have trusted betrays you, when what you have pursued reveals itself as hollow, that is when the eye begins to open. And what it sees first is terrifying. The emptiness of the social script, the futility of ambition, the cyclical cruelty of desire. For the first time you understand that you were not living. You were being lived. By impulses not your own, by goals not examined, by a machinery that needs you blind to survive. You see that even your suffering was expected, priced into the system, made useful to someone else. This moment of awakening is not euphoric. It is nauseating. For to see clearly is to feel the weight of your complicity. You cannot blame your captors alone. You held the blindfold in place. You whispered its lullabies to yourself. You believed what was convenient and denied what was real. The blindfold is comfortable, but it costs you everything. It is why your days pass in a fog, why your actions feel hollow, why the pleasures that once thrilled now barely register. It is the reason for your quiet despair, the dull ache beneath your distractions. You try to fix this ache by playing the game better. You double down, work harder, seek more validation. But the cure is what poisoned you. It is not that you failed to succeed. It is that success itself was never what you were promised. The world does not want you wise. It wants you willing. Willing to trade time for money. Willing to confuse noise with knowledge. Willing to believe that to be seen is to be real. And if you refuse, it does not punish you. It ignores you. And that silence is louder than any rebuke. Those who truly see become invisible, not because they are unworthy, but because they are inconvenient. They speak of things that cannot be sold. They ask questions that do not fit the template. They remind the world of what it has agreed to forget. To live with open eyes is not to live joyfully. It is to live honestly. And honesty has no public relations department. It has no market niche. It is ugly. It is inconvenient. It strips you of illusions you have learned to love. The man who sees is often mistaken for a pessimist, but he is not pessimistic. He is precise. He has measured the world and found its architecture built not on truth but on utility, not on beauty but on spectacle, not on virtue but on performance. He sees that modern life is a factory of distraction. Every app, every notification, every scrolling feed is designed not to inform you but to prevent you from remembering yourself. You are kept in motion so that stillness never arrives. Because stillness is dangerous. It might lead to thought, and thought might lead to change. The blindfold keeps you busy, and the busier you are, the more virtuous you are seen to be. You say, "I don't have time to think." But it is not time you lack, it is courage. Remove the blindfold and you will lose everything false. But in return, you will gain everything real. You will see that love based on performance is not love, that friendship founded on utility is not friendship, that happiness manufactured by consumption is not happiness. You will see that your worth has never been negotiable, that your soul, long silenced, still waits patiently beneath the rubble of your personas, that your deepest pain was always the signal, not the problem. And in this seeing, your life will fracture. The house you built on the sand of imitation will collapse. The people who preferred your mask will vanish. You will walk alone, not as punishment, but as initiation. There is a dignity in this solitude that no crowd can offer. It is not the solitude of exile, but of return. You are not leaving the world. You are re-entering it with eyes that finally belong to you. The blindfolded man is praised for fitting in. The awakened man is condemned for refusing to pretend. But there is no turning back. Once you have seen, you cannot unsee. You can pretend, but you will feel the lie in your bones. You can return to the game, but every move will taste like betrayal. So you walk a different path now, not higher, not holier, just more real. You speak less, you observe more. You no longer fight for every opinion. You choose where your energy goes. And most importantly, you protect your perception, because you understand now that vision is not given, it is chosen. And to see, truly see, is the most dangerous and sacred act a human being can commit. And now the question becomes, what do you do with this sight? What becomes of a man who no longer wants what the world sells, who no longer kneels at the altars of ambition, who no longer finds nourishment in the common dreams? He builds anew, not a system, not a philosophy, not a revolution, but a life, a quiet, deliberate life, one rooted in simplicity, not success, in presence, not performance, in the sacred rhythm of thought unhurried by the whip of urgency. He wakes without alarms. He speaks when speech is needed. He no longer fills silence to soothe others' discomfort. He no longer rushes to be understood. For he knows that most will never understand. Their eyes are not yet ready. Their blindfolds still feel like skin. The blindfold is not just cultural, it is biological. The will lives within you. It whispers through desire, fear, hunger. It directs your gaze away from the eternal and toward the immediate. And so, to see is to suffer. To see is to refuse the invitation to distraction, to decline the feast of fleeting pleasures. It is to face yourself naked and unremarkable, without titles, without narrative. Few accept this burden. Most return to the comfort of the crowd, to the rhythm of routine, to the language of lies. But you who continue, you discover that beneath the ashes of falsehood a small flame endures. It is not dramatic, it is not cinematic, it is calm. And in its calm, it contains everything. You were blindfolded from the start, but you are not blind by nature. You were made to see. To see clearly is not to find answers. It is to dissolve the need for them. The blindfold promised certainty. It offered a neat narrative, a role to play, a destination. But once it falls, the path is not illuminated. It vanishes. What remains is not a new map, but the courage to walk without one. You begin to live in questions, not as problems to be solved, but as companions to be respected. You begin to inhabit uncertainty not as failure, but as freedom. For what is more liberating than no longer pretending to know? This is the philosopher's path. Not accumulation, but shedding. Not conquest, but surrender. And yet the world will still ask for your mask. It will tempt you with relevance, with influence, with the praise of the very blindness you left behind. You must resist. Not because these things are evil, but because they are noise. And noise is the first thread of a new blindfold. Protect your vision. Let it inform your choices, not decorate your language. Let it shape your solitude, not perform your awakening. Let it be a compass, not a flag. The wise man walks quietly because he knows how loud the blindfolded world is. He speaks carefully because he remembers how words can become traps. He teaches if he must, not with argument but with example. He is not interested in convincing. He is interested in clarity. And clarity does not convert. It calls. Only those ready to hear will answer. You were blindfolded from the start. But now, with eyes open and illusions fallen, you walk differently. Not toward some higher plane, but simply away from what is false. And that is the most radical act of all. What do you owe the world now that you see it? Nothing. Not your explanation, not your apology, not your re-entry. The world that blindfolded you is not entitled to your return. Its systems do not need reform. They need abandonment. Its institutions do not require critique. They require irrelevance. The clear-sighted man does not shout down illusions. He walks away from them. He does not waste his life disinfecting a swamp. He builds a home in higher ground. This does not mean isolation. It means integration on your terms. It means choosing which lies you tolerate and which you dissolve. It means embracing the burden of autonomy, the discomfort of not belonging. But to belong where truth is absent is to be lost in company. And solitude in clarity is not loneliness. It is sanctuary. You begin to notice things others miss. You see the frantic pace not as efficiency but fear. The need to speak constantly not as intelligence but insecurity. The thirst for approval not as social instinct but spiritual starvation. And you realize the blindfolded are not your enemy. They are your mirror. You were once them. Their resistance to your clarity is not malice. It is memory. They recognize in you what they've silenced in themselves. You do not wake them by shouting. You wake them by staying awake. In the way you choose silence over spectacle. In the way you honor the slow over the successful. In the way you live without performance and survive. That in time becomes the invitation. And some, not many, will accept. There is no final destination for the man who sees. No summit to reach. No medal to hang. No ceremony of arrival. Seeing is not a state. It is a posture. It must be chosen each day against convenience, against comfort, against conformity. There will be days you envy the blindfolded, their certainty, their belonging, their ability to rest in illusions you can no longer touch. But remember, their peace is rented, yours is built. The cost of seeing is great, but the cost of blindness is your life. And there is no greater waste than a soul that spent itself playing roles it never chose, fulfilling purposes it never questioned, dying while smiling for an audience that never looked. And so you continue. You sharpen your vision by caring less what others think and more about what is true. You speak only when silence would betray you. You surround yourself not with fans, but with few, sincere companions. You measure your success not in outcomes, but in integrity. You no longer ask, did I win? But was I honest? The blindfold may tempt you again. Some days it will whisper its familiar promises. But your eyes have learned the contours of truth, and once known, they are not easily unlearned. To live this way is to live without shelter, but also without chains. You were blindfolded from the start, but you die awake. And that, in a world so deeply asleep, is the closest thing to freedom you will ever know. Perhaps the final illusion is this, that awakening will be acknowledged, that the world will bow to your clarity, that your insight will be welcomed with gratitude, that others will say, ah, you were right. But they won't. Truth is not a currency the world trades in. It is not awarded, ranked, or even heard. The deeper you go, the more foreign your voice will sound, not because you are mad, but because the world is drunk. You speak sobriety to a system addicted to noise. So let go of recognition. Let go of legacy. Let go of the need to be remembered by a world that refused to see you. Your task is not to win. It is to witness. To witness your own transformation. To witness the stripping away of all that was never real. To witness in small moments the beauty that only arrives when performance ends. The sound of the wind without narration. The face of a friend without expectation. The presence of your own being without apology. This is what you were blindfolded from, and not some secret formula, but this, the unbearable simplicity of what is. And now, at the end of the long path, eyes raw, illusions burned, you sit, not enlightened, but honest. You do not shine, you remain. And in a world of vanishing men, that is everything. There is no finish line, not for the man who sees. Awakening is not a single event, but a lifelong unmasking of culture, of desire, of self. Each layer peeled reveals another, more subtle illusion. Each truth earned demands the death of a former comfort. You begin to understand that even the idea of arrival is an echo of the blindfold. You do not arrive, you shed, you dissolve, you descend, not into despair, but into depth. Depth is what they took from you when they handed you certainty. When they replaced mystery with instruction, wonder with data, silence with stimulation. They gave you a world mapped out in advance, but the map was not the terrain. It was a prison shaped like a promise. And so you live now without a map. You move by intuition. You choose by resonance. You rest when others rush. And this too becomes sacred. The awakened life is not glamorous. It is not photogenic. It resists the algorithm. It cannot be performed because its very essence is inward. You will not trend. You will not be a brand. You will not be recognized by those who still chase mirrors. But you will feel something they cannot name. Peace. Not the peace of victory, not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of alignment, of walking the earth without pretending, of no longer defending your truth against the misunderstanding of the blindfolded, of letting go of the need to be admired by those who have not yet met themselves. And in this letting go, in this last surrender, you begin to feel what freedom actually is. Not escape, but return. Return to what? To simplicity, to stillness, to the place before the stories, before the striving, before the scripted self was installed, to the quiet knowing that does not announce itself. It just is. This is the hidden origin. Before you were told to be somebody, you simply were. Before you were groomed to perform, you existed in truth. The child does not wear a mask. It is handed one by adults who have forgotten their face. You have removed that mask. Or perhaps it has fallen cracked under the weight of your suffering. Either way, it is no longer yours to wear. And now, what remains? Not a new identity, but a self that no longer needs one. A gaze that no longer projects. A heart that no longer bargains. You do not need to explain your path. You do not need to rescue others from theirs. You need only to walk, without noise, without need. The man who walks without need becomes dangerous, not because he seeks power, but because he cannot be controlled. You cannot bribe him with status. You cannot scare him with exile. You cannot seduce him with praise. He is immune, not to pain, but to flattery, not to loss, but to distraction. He sees clearly, and therefore he chooses clearly. And his clarity ripples quietly across a culture built on confusion. They will call him arrogant, detached, cynical. But he is not. He is simply awake. And his very existence becomes a lighthouse for those whose blindfolds have begun to fray. You were blindfolded from the start, but you were not made to die that way. And now, finally, you won't. What you seek now is not more, but less. Less noise, less striving, less of the artificial urgency that once governed your days like a tyrant in a crown of deadlines. You crave slowness not because you are lazy, but because haste is a kind of violence, a rupture from the present. The man who always hurries does not live, he escapes. And life, as you now understand, is not found in speed but in contact. With thought, with breath, with beauty unannounced. Even the way you suffer has changed, and it is no longer personal. It is no longer interpreted as failure. It is no longer dramatized into identity. It simply arises, does its work, and departs, like weather. And you, rooted in clarity, remain undisturbed. This is not indifference. It is liberation from entanglement. It is the end of fighting what never needed your resistance. Only your seeing. Seeing does not fix the world. It does not stop war or corruption or ignorance. But it does end one thing: your complicity. You no longer fund illusions with your energy. You no longer participate in games you do not believe in. You no longer chase prizes that dissolve in your hands. And in this refusal, the world shifts, not globally but intimately. You create a zone of sanity in a culture gone mad, and others feel it. They may not speak of it. They may not understand it, but they sense it. The integrity of your presence, the silence behind your words, the depth behind your gaze. And in that moment, their own blindfolds flicker. So what remains? Not a doctrine, not a destination, not a brand of awakening. Only this: a man who sees. He no longer needs meaning to be manufactured or truth to be delivered. He no longer needs the world to validate his clarity. He walks, and in his walking there is quiet. He drinks water and finds it sacred. He watches the wind move through trees and feels no urge to comment. He hears another speak nonsense and feels no need to correct. He does not seek to win arguments, only to remain unpoisoned by them. This is not retreat. It is re-entry without submission. To see is not to abandon the world. It is to return to it clean. And perhaps in this stillness, in this refusal to act from compulsion, in this full inhabiting of the moment without blindfold, you do what no system expected of you. You live, and that at last is the heresy. Not to rage, not to revolt, but to awaken quietly, to live on your own terms, to smile without performance, to leave the game, not as loser or winner, but as one who finally understood the rules. You were blindfolded from the start, but your eyes are open now, and you will never give them back. Now you begin again, not as the person you were, but as the person revealed beneath the shedding. You find yourself less reactive. You are no longer baited by provocation, nor tempted by flattery. You witness emotions arise and pass without chaining your identity to them. You let others speak falsehoods without reflexively correcting them. Your peace no longer requires the world's agreement. You choose your companions carefully, not for their charm, but for their silence, not for their brilliance, but for their steadiness. You prefer conversations that feel like still water, not because they are dull, but because they reflect depth. And in this state, your relationship with time changes, and you are not rushing toward an imagined future. You are not dragging the weight of an unexamined past. You live increasingly in presence, not because you have mastered it, but because you have ceased fleeing from it. Presence is the final frontier, not the presence of performance, of curated awareness, of spiritual posturing, but the unadorned presence of a man who has nothing left to prove, who does not seek to dazzle, to convert, to impress, who merely is. The blindfolded man needs intensity to feel alive. The awakened man finds aliveness in the ordinary. He walks slower. He speaks with intention. He notices the way light pools at dusk. And in doing so, he enters a rhythm the world has long forgotten. Not the rhythm of productivity, but the rhythm of being. And so you arrive at the place beyond ambition, not in resignation, but in return. You no longer chase legacy. You no longer dream of permanence. You accept that all things fade, and in that acceptance you finally live. You give without needing to be remembered. You create without needing to be seen. You speak without needing to be right. This is the end of ego, not its destruction, but its irrelevance. You no longer negotiate your worth. You no longer seek affirmation from strangers. What matters now is alignment, not with the world, with yourself. And that self, stripped of pretense, is more than enough. When you were blindfolded, you feared insignificance. You needed titles, achievements, validation. But now you see, insignificance was never the enemy. It was the doorway. For only when the self is emptied of illusion can it be filled with clarity. You were blindfolded from the start, but clarity is not behind you. It is here now in this breath, this stillness, this sentence, and you awake remain.